All right, good morning and good afternoon for some of you. Thanks for joining FSMA Friday for August 28, 2020, the back to school edition of FSMA Friday, even if your kids are like mine and it's more like back to the breakfast nook. So my name is Aaron Bolshaw. I'm the VP of Marketing for SafetyChain and the moderator for FSMA Fridays. For those that aren't aware, maybe your first time to FSMA Fridays, we do see a few new faces in the virtual faces in the registration now, so it's good to see we're still growing. This is an ongoing monthly industry update for food and beverage facility operators at QA, safety, compliance professionals, and SafetyChain partners with the Atchison Group, also known as TAG, to bring you these presentations. We got a lot of ground to cover today. We've got intentional adulteration. We're talking about writing that food defense plan, gearing up for some quick checks next year, and when those are going to start to happen from the FDA, things are starting to pick back up. So lots and lots to cover here. And before we get going, I just want to make sure everyone understands we can hear you. You are not able, sorry, the other way around. You can hear us, we can't hear you, but we do want to hear from you is what I'm trying to say. So everyone's on mute. Send us questions though. We're going to have a lot of questions, I think, at the end. So we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Listen, we said this is going to be about a half hour. No kidding, there's so much to cover. We think we'll probably go a little over a half hour. For those of you that can join and stay a little bit longer, we'd love to have you stay. So, and with that, if you do have any audio issues, a lot of times if you just use that call-in number on that console on the right side of your screen, that'll clear some issues up right away. So, all right, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Christopher Snabes, Director of Food Safety with TAG. Christopher, deep experience in the food industry, certified food scientist and food microbiologist, and one of maybe a handful of authorized lead instructors for vulnerability analysis component of food defense plan, which is a really big component. So this is the perfect person to have us walk through the IA rule and some other things. So with that, welcome, Christopher.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you everybody out there who's decided to join us today. I'm happy to present this topic.
Yeah, we've got a couple hundred, looks like coming in on 500 people on the line. So a lot of people out there. No pressure though, Christopher, no pressure. So you're also an avid outdoorsman. You've been involved in the Boy Scouts for just about as long as you have the food industry. You play a little golf here and there. And when we were preparing for this, you'd mentioned, yeah, there isn't a lot of new authorizations going on for lead instructors. There was one virtual, but you're one of maybe around a 50-ish zone, and TAG has 2 on staff. So I think, though, what more importantly, possibly, is that you're also involved in salmon fishing. You've got a tournament coming up. So I think you're probably, of the 50, you're the best salmon fisher. Is that
accurate? Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good. Well, we're going to get started here. I'm going to give you also co-controls of this so that we do get through this very quickly. Now, you've been following, and TAG has been following the whole adulteration, this thing, for quite some time now. It kind of got put on pause. But we're kind of moving through that now. Why don't you take us through the latest updates?
Sure, be happy to. Since the last FSMA Friday, some information came about regarding the latest updates with food defense. In July 10th, we resumed. The FDA announced that they're going to resume domestic inspections of food facilities. And part of that inspection, at the very end of the inspection, whether it be a GMP inspection or a FSMA readiness inspection, or even for a cause, they're going to start doing what's called a quick check, just a 10-minute conversation to discuss your food defense and how are you prepared for your food defense plans. And we'll discuss what some of those quick check questions are at the end of this presentation. The other update is that the compliance date for small businesses went into effect in July 27th. So if you're a large business or a small business, you are supposed to have a written food defense plan. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What is a written food defense plan? What does it consist of? And if you could advance the slide, please.
You bet. You should have control too, Christopher. We'll get this nailed down though. That might be on me.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna today's talk's gonna be split up into 3 different sections: expectations on training, your different options of writing a food defense plan, because there is flexibility in how you write your food defense plan, and we're gonna end up the discussion talking about the quick checks that I mentioned a moment ago. So what are some of the basics about the IA rule? It's important to remember that this covers domestic as well as overseas facilities. So if you're having food imported from overseas for U.S. consumption, those FDA food facilities also must have a written food defense plan. It does not include animal food. Animal food's exempt. An interesting twist about this plan other than the rest of the FSMA world, is that it includes companies who are involved with low acid canned food, seafood HACCP, juice HACCP, dietary supplements, bottled water, infant formula. All those segments of the food industry also now must have a food defense plan. They had separate FDA regulations that were to the side of FSMA. However, under FSMA, these types of organizations now must also follow the IA rule. Your food defense plans for the larger facilities, they were required to be in place in July of last year. Another important fact to remember is your food defense plan is site specific. You can't have a quote unquote corporate food defense plan apply to every facility underneath your umbrella. Every place is different. So everybody's got to have their own food defense plan. And some of the overarching principles of intentional adulteration is we have to address the inside attacker, okay? And the other thing is to remember the intent of this rule is to prevent mass casualties, mass death. Think of large-scale harm. That's the whole intent of this rule. Stop the inside attacker from attacking, and we want to prevent mass harm. I'm having trouble advancing the slide. Sorry.
There you go. If you click on it and then go left and right with your arrows, I think you should have full control. There you go. All right. We're cooking with Crisco now.
There we go. Okay, it's delayed on my screen. I'm sorry. For those of you who are real familiar with FSMA and your food safety plan, this little color chart that's on your screen, it should be quite familiar to you. It's very similar. In order to write your food defense plan, you must start out with a written vulnerability assessment, similar to a hazard analysis assessment. Think of it that way. You need specialized training in order to do a vulnerability assessment. You have to look at every point, step, of procedure, which is commonly referred to as a key activity type, is what we're looking for, and we'll describe what a key activity type is. There's 4 of them. And depending on how they're assessed, the key activity type may become an actionable process step. For every APS, you have to implement a mitigation strategy, and then, as you can imagine, there's monitoring involved, corrective actions involved, verifications involved, there's a reanalysis step, and all along the way, there's documentation that must be included. And there's various trainings for various steps, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah, and we wanted to just kind of take everyone's temperature real quick. I'm going to start a poll and ask everyone to answer just a quick question, which is going to come up on everyone's screen in just a second. So if we get this, it'll start up. Wanted to understand what best describes your existing food defense plan, and the poll right now should be coming up. Everyone see it on your screens? There we go. All right, it's a little bit of a lag time. I think the internet's jammed. So yeah, what best describes your preparedness for food defense written plan? So we've got a few things here. select one of the following. We have a GFSI food defense written plan. We have version 1.0. We have version 2.0. We have a partial plan written. Maybe you're in that process. And maybe some haven't begun the writing process yet. Take another second here. I think that we'll probably see a wide variety of this. I think a lot of people may have GFSIs, right? That's the sort of fallback. That's kind of where we see a lot of our customers even. Let's take one more second here. We've got about 61% people voted. All right, we're going to close it. Last ones. All right, let's share the results now. So again, my apologies. Christopher, are you able to see it on your side yet? There we go. Oh, what do you think about this? Yeah, what do you think about this?
That's very interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about this. The GFSI, for those of you who have the GFSI food defense plan, that's great. It's a great start. I just want to let everybody out there know that it does not meet the intentional adulteration criteria. So please take a further look at what you are missing. You're almost there, but there are a few gaps. For those of you using version 1.0, it's not aligned with the IA rule, so please look at version 2.0. And we'll talk some more about what's required in the plan as we go on throughout this seminar.
All right, great. Well, and thanks everyone for sharing where you're at. I know sometimes we don't want to share exactly where we're at, but we appreciate that honesty. Christopher, take us through the types of training that are out there.
Yes. So there's a great website. It's the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance website, and it offers a lot of different types of trainings. And there's all kinds of companies, private companies as well, that offer lots of trainings. Some of the types of trainings that are out there versus required versus optional is we start off with the overview of the Intentional Adulteration Rule, and that is free, and that's for anybody. Anybody could take that, and that's a great way to just get an idea. What does the rule consist of? From there's one type of training that is mandatory, and that is for anybody who works at an actionable process step, and that's called Food Defense Awareness Training. And food defense awareness training is for any employee who works at actionable process step and their immediate supervisor. That's the one type of training that is actually required. You have to have that. It's a free course. It is offered online at the FSPCA website. The next type of training is for those who want to learn how to identify a key activity type, or a CAT. And that course, you could take it either for free, or you could pay a small fee to FSPCA and get a certificate that shows you've officially been trained in how to identify a CAT. The next type of training that's presented is identifying and explaining mitigation strategies. That's a specific course. And again, it is offered either with a fee, and you get a certificate of training, or without a fee. You can take it either way. If you don't pay a fee, you don't get a certificate, however. But document your training anyways, so it shows that you have taken that type of training. The next type of training is very specific, and it's conducting vulnerability assessments. And conducting a vulnerability assessment is a type of training that can only be offered in person. As Aaron said, TAG has 2 lead instructors on staff. I'm one of them that can actually teach this course to everybody. It's fee-based. It's strongly advised you take CAT training and mitigation training as a prerequisite to understand the vulnerability assessment process. I'm going to talk a little bit further on this specific training in a few more slides coming up. The last set of training, again, is either with a fee or without a fee, and that is food defense plan preparation and reanalysis. So that's putting the whole plan together. Every one of these steps, you can become what's called an FDQI, a food defense qualified individual. So you can see you can become an FDQI for individual portions of writing a food defense plan, or you could take all the training for all the segments and become FDQI trained for all of them. So you actually have lots of options. You don't have to take the FSPCA course to become FDQI. If you have enough education and background and experience, either through other types of education in food defense awareness, understanding the written IA rule as presented by the FDA, and if it's all documented, that could be another way to become a food defense qualified individual. The FSPCA courses are really good courses. They're recognized by the FDA as one way to become trained. Trying to advance the slide here.
Yeah, and I think what we've got, Christopher, is a bit of a lag going on. So between our two systems, we're sharing one desktop. So we'll give it a second. If you need me to, I can advance it, but I'm not sure if I'll accidentally advance one more for you. So there you go.
It'd probably be easier if I just have you advance the slide.
You tell me when. I'm at your service.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so before you write your food defense plan, what do you have to do? It's similar to when you write your food safety plan. You want to get a team, right? So you want to assemble people who have multiple backgrounds that can understand different key points of the food that you or beverage that you manufacture. You don't want to have a large team. You want to have a small team that's very competent. I would suggest somebody from quality assurance or QC, somebody from maintenance, somebody from procurement, some plant operator, a supervisor, something like that. Have some of those types of people on your team, and probably somebody from upper management would be very good to be on your team as well. Write a flow chart. How does your process flow work from start to finish? In many instances, you can use your existing FSMA flow chart or HACCP flow chart as a flow chart. And that flow chart is great because that helps you identify each step, process, and procedure as the food is being prepared and produced, and that'll help you with the rest of your assessment. Determine who needs to become a food defense qualified individual so you can go on and perform your written vulnerability assessment. We just went over some of the types of training, and you can see there's a lot of different steps. And then actually write your vulnerability assessment. It's the first step in writing your plan. It's to determine, well, where are my vulnerable points? If I was a bad guy, where would I attack? And that's where you determine initially what your key activity types are. Universally, there's 4 key activity types. The FDA went ahead and did all kinds of studies and boiled it all down to 4 generic types of vulnerabilities that any facility can have. And that's bulk liquid receiving and loading, liquid storage and handling, secondary ingredient handling, mixing, and similar activities. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so that's the lag we're seeing. We've got a little bit of the issue. I've already advanced the slide. We've got option 1, write your plan based on CAP at the top of the screen.
Okay.
Christopher, let me know when you see that.
Okay, now I see it. So your first option in writing your vulnerability assessment is to just go ahead and say, okay, do I have any of those 4 CATs? And that's simply looking for those 4 key activity types. If you have them, identify them on your plan. And then you need to address those. It's a very easy way to determine if you have any vulnerability points within your facility. The FDA has recognized that as completely acceptable. There are some cons to doing that. If you were to take that route, that automatically makes every CAT an actionable process step. For every actionable process step, you then must implement a mitigation strategy, as well as everything else that goes along with that, such as monitoring, corrective action, and so on and so forth. The other side effect of making every CAT an APS using this method is you might be implementing a mitigation strategy that's not required. And that can lead to increased capital expenditure, which nobody wants. There's only so much money in the pot. And that might increase more paperwork, additional personnel, and you actually might miss an actual process step because you are only looking just for those 4 cats specifically. Next slide, please.
There we go. And there are 3 elements to this, right, Christopher? So when you see that pop up in yours, we can start going again.
Well, I wanted to talk about option 2 first, which is conducting a vulnerability assessment using the 3 elements. It should be the slide just before this.
There it is. There it is. We got option 2.
Okay. All right. Okay. I don't see option 2. So, do you see option 2 on your slide, your screen?
Yeah. This is
there we go.
So what we're seeing,
okay.
I sent a note to everyone on the webinar. We apologize. We are definitely having some bandwidth and technical problems with the webinar provider. We're doing our best. Keep it going, Christopher. You're good.
Okay. All right. Option 2. Option 2 is using the vulnerability assessment with the 3 elements. This is a pretty nice option. I highly encourage many companies to use this option. It specifically addresses the inside attacker. You use your flow chart, and then you look at your cats, and you can actually apply metrics to each of the key activity types to determine, does it really become an actual process step? And we use 3 fundamental elements, which I'll describe in a minute. All 3 are considered, and they're scored, and there is a predetermined scale that the FDA provides for you. You are allowed, again, you have flexibility. FSMA allows a lot of flexibility with all the rules, and the Intentional Adulteration Rule is no exception. You have the option to use your own scale. However, if you do use your own scale, you must have a very good written justification as to why you use that scale, but it is allowed. Using the scales that the FDA has provided, it allows you to assess each point, step, and procedure to determine if there is a cat. So you look at every single step and procedure on that flow chart, and you assess it using metrics, and you determine if it's a cat. And it allows you to prevent skipping any potential point, step, or procedure. And it's very thorough, and it's pretty nice. Next slide, please. I'm going to discuss exactly what are these 3 elements, right?
Yep.
So
yeah. Now, while this is coming up, Christopher, is there any recommendation for anyone? We do see a quick question coming through that they use their own or they use a pre-built. Any at all recommendation from your side? In general, most facilities will use the FDA's default scale system. Yeah.
However, there are instances, especially if you have an on-staff toxicologist, a lot of people don't have that luxury. But if you do, they may wish to use their own scale, and they might have a very good justification as why. Let's go back to what the 3 elements are, because people are probably out there who aren't familiar with this rule are probably in a haze saying, what are these 3 elements? Well, there's 3 different things we worry about: criticality, accessibility, and vulnerability. So element 1 is, what is the potential public health impact of that each step, point, or process if something were to be added? And that actually has options of different ways you can approach that. You can look at the volume of food. You can use what's called a representative contaminant. The FDA actually has a default dose number that you could use. Or you could do contaminant-specific analysis, and that's where you have to assess every known potential contaminant dose at each step, point, or procedure. That's very complex. Again, it's usually an in-house toxicologist is the type of person that would do that kind of work. That is a lot of work. I'm not going to deny that. The second thing we assess is accessibility. What is the degree of physical access to the product? Can a bad guy actually gain access to it? Is it open? Is it locked? Does it have any inherent characteristics that would prevent somebody from getting into it? So that's something you need to score. The third thing, or element 3, is the vulnerability. What is the ability of an attacker to successfully contaminate the product? Could that bad guy actually carry a certain amount needed in order to cause wide-scale public health harm? And all three of these steps you score and justify your score. Next slide, please.
And we'll get into the pros and cons next of the three elements. Oh, there you go, Christopher. Yep.
Thank you. So what are the pros and cons of using the three-element approach? Well, the pro is the scale is already predetermined by the FDA. They did a lot of work for you, which is very nice. They even give you flexibility using element 1. When using representative contaminant approach of element 1, the FDA does recognize the default factor for you. It's very thorough and eliminates inherent characteristics from becoming a cat. The con is you must have a detailed explanation of why it is not an APS based on score. You must justify in writing if you use a different scoring scale. The FDA will scrutinize your own dose factor if using contaminant-specific analysis in element 1, so you really have to be careful. And you may not realize all the potential modes of contamination that are classified by Homeland Security. Homeland Security is not giving out a list of what all these bad contaminants are, okay? So that could lead to a potential inadequate score, thus an inadequate food defense plan as a whole. So if you use your own scale and you don't use the contaminant, if you use the contaminant-specific approach, you really, really must be thorough and be very, very careful. Next slide, please.
You bet. And then we did, of course, a third option, as you call it, kind of a hybrid. Yeah.
So a hybrid is a combination of option 1 and 2. A hybrid is where you say, okay, I'm just going to take a look at what are my cats own, I guess you could say a quick and dirty look. What are my cats? You identified your cats. And then from there, just score the cats only using the three-element approach. The FDA says that's completely acceptable. It's easy to do. It's fairly quick to do. It eliminates a lot of time. They feel that it's thorough. It helps you with your decision process. And it's an excellent way to defend whether or not you need to spend any capital investment on mitigation strategies. The con, it's super hard to do without taking the class. So the IAVA course is highly recommended. You don't have to take it. It is written in the guidance document. However, the course gives you a lot of other inside information. The course will give you lots of working examples. The instructor will actually work with you as you do the multiplication factors. So it's very, very useful. If you use the contaminant-specific analysis element 1, again, you may not realize all the potential modes of contamination that are classified by Homeland Security and the FDA. And that could lead to an inadequate food defense plan as a whole, which nobody really wants. Next slide, please.
You got it. That's coming up here. We'll keep your questions coming in. We see a lot of good stuff coming in. Christopher, take it away. Sorry.
Sure. As you can imagine, there's more to the rule than just writing a vulnerability assessment. So once your vulnerability assessment is done and you've determined whether or not you have an actual process step, if you have an actual process step, you must implement the following. Monitoring. You have to find a way, you have to determine what is going to be the proper way to monitor your APS. You then have to implement corrective action procedures in case it were to fail. You have to have verification procedures that you're doing it properly. All along the way, you have to retain records of everything you do. And similar to the food safety plan, records must be kept for a minimum of 2 years. There is help from the FDA on their website on mitigation strategies. If you're having a hard time trying to figure out what mitigation strategy should I implement in my APS or my CAT, you can actually go to one of their websites, the mitigation strategy website, and it gives you lots of great ideas. In many instances, an actual process step, the mitigation strategy is going to be a combination of more than just one mitigation strategy. So there can be several layers of mitigation strategies. And you have lots of options for whatever works for your facility. There's more information on this last part as well in the third guidance document that came out in February, and that's the mitigation strategies to protect food against intentional adulteration. Next slide, please. Similar to your food safety plan, there's a reanalysis with the food defense plan. So it has to be reanalyzed a minimum of once every 3 years, or for any of the following reasons. Whenever there's a significant change that creates the potential for a new vulnerability or a significant increase in one previously identified. Whenever there is new information about potential vulnerabilities associated with a food operation or facility. When a mitigation strategy is not properly implemented. And whenever the FDA requires reanalysis to respond to new vulnerabilities, credible threats, or developments in scientific understanding. Next slide, please. So what are your options out there? Currently, there is a program called the Food Defense Plan Builder version 2.0. And you can use that. That plan builder is fully aligned with the rule as it's written. For those of you who've used version 1.0, and I noticed there was some of you who did on that poll, unfortunately, most of version 1.0 does not meet the full IA rule. Most of that information is going to now be supporting documentation for version 2.0. It can be backloaded in version 2.0 and help you get started, but version 1.0 is not adequate. Don't wait. The FDA is expecting you to have your written food defense plans in place. We already know that large businesses had to have it last year. Small businesses had to have it this summer. And we are now seeing the FDA resuming site inspections, which is resulting in what we call a quick check. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this some more. A quick check is a simple 10-minute conversation that the FDA is going to have with you when they come to your facility for a different reason. So they might come to your facility for a GMP inspection or for a FSMA inspection or for a for-cause inspection. When it's done at the end, they're going to ask you some questions about your food defense plan. The next slide, please.
Yeah, Christopher, and while this is coming up, so if I hear you right, they're educating through the quick checks, and they're not necessarily going to come out specifically for a quick check. They're going to sort of tack it on to maybe a GMP or for a cause. Is that accurate?
That is completely accurate. Yes.
Okay. Got it.
In fact, the FDA's strategies on this slide, it's a two-tiered approach. It's very similar to how the other FSMA rules are rolled out. Educate before they regulate. The Food Defense Plan Quick Check is going to be conducted on all covered facilities. There's very low burden on the agency and industry by doing this quick check. It's just a simple few questions that they're going to ask. And there's very little required training for the investigators coming out asking these food defense type questions. It's conducted only on a limited number of prioritized facilities. The focus is going to be on resources where the IA concern is the highest. Where is the highest threat, according to the FDA and Homeland Security? This will be done by some very specialized training for investigators. So we have very few of them out there. And they will go through your food defense plan, and they'll walk through your facility, and they will be highly scrutinizing your facility. Next slide, please. Okay, so I talked a lot about these quick checks, and you might be asking yourself, okay, what are these quick checks? What are these questions? So here on the slide are some typical questions that the FDA may ask you. They may ask you some other questions in relation to this, but this is in general, this is a good idea of typical things you might be asked. Do you have a written food defense plan? Believe it or not, there's a lot of food facilities who haven't even started. Was it written by a food defense qualified individual? Did you conduct a written vulnerability assessment? If so, have you identified any cats? Did you use the 3-element approach as an option? Have you considered the possibility of an inside attacker? This is a question for all of those of you who have a GFSI food defense plan. You need to go back and rethink. In many instances, GFSI food defense categories do not consider the inside attacker. This is critical. Another question they can ask is, have you implemented any mitigation strategies? Has it been signed and dated by the FDQI? Very similar to the food safety plan, right? The PCQI has to sign and date it. Do you have any corrective actions in place? If you do, how are you verifying? Have you had a food defense incident? If so, did you contact the FBI? This is a criminal act. If you had a food defense incident, that's considered a criminal concern, and FBI needs to be brought in. As you'll see on the slide here on the right-hand side, SafetyChain's actually put out a little infographic that has an example of some of these quick check questions you can download and have near your desk. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I think that that kind of wraps it up. We've got a ton of questions, Christopher. This is so great. I wanted to get into all that. Yeah, like you said, you can definitely get into lots more resources available. We'll get to more resources in just a minute, Christopher. But a couple other questions here. Are there other Christopher, are there other options other than the key activity types?
Well, you can either use the key activity type all by itself, or you can go ahead and use the 3-element approach where you assess every point, step, or procedure. Those are the two main ways to write your vulnerability assessment. There's also the hybrid where you can take just identifying the cats proper, just the cats only, and then use the 3-element approach for those cats. Mm-hmm. Those are the ways that the FDA recognizes how to approach a written vulnerability assessment for your written food defense plan.
Yeah, great. I think we covered this. Just to cover it one more time, I think we've got some pet food folks on the line. Are food defense plans required for pet food plans?
No, animal food is exempt. So all of you animal food people can have a big sigh of relief. That's one less set of paperwork you have to do. Now, if those animal food facilities are required to have something per their GFSI scheme, that's a different story. But per FSMA, per FDA, they do not have to have a written food defense plan.
Great point. Very good. All right. So here's a really interesting one. Does quote unquote intentional adulteration include both economically motivated adulteration and what was traditionally called bioterrorism?
So it addresses economically motivated adulteration if the intent is to cause mass casualties and harm. Part of the food safety plan, hazard analysis, has a clause in it where you have to look at economically motivated adulteration that causes a food safety issue. That's a little bit different than looking at things that can cause mass casualty, mass harm. Bioterrorism, by definition, doesn't necessarily have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? There is a lot of similarity and overlap between bioterrorism and writing the food defense plan, yes, but there are some differences. And I'd have
this is exactly.
I can reply in a longer email to whoever that person is.
Okay, great. Yeah, because they basically said the terminology is confusing and often used incorrectly, it seems. So, I mean, that's a great point for clarification. So, thank you, Christopher. Yeah. We got time for a few more. So one actually is does a quote unquote very small business by the FDA definition need to have a food defense plan?
So if they make less than $10 million a year, including all food, sold and unsold, over a 3-year average, they only have to document that they are making that much money. Once they cross that threshold of $10 million average, then they have to have a written food defense plan. Before that time, they do not have to have a written food defense plan. They just have to maintain the documentation that they're under that $10 million threshold. That $10 million threshold is based on the year 2011, so it has to be adjusted for inflation.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, that's good to know. I knew it was the 3-year average, but I didn't know there was adjustments for inflation. So, okay.
Yep.
Here's a two-part question for you, Christopher. Someone wanting a little clarification. Did you say all employees involved in a CAT must participate in food awareness training? Can the company make their own training that includes all components from this training to be compliant?
Sure, yeah. You can have individualized company training that teaches food defense awareness for anybody who works at a key activity type and their immediate supervisor. You can also have food defense awareness for your entire facility, everybody. I actually highly encourage companies to teach all employees about food defense awareness. It's the simple phrase, if you see something, say something. If all employees have been trained in food defense, and if somebody who happens to notice a potential bad guy doing something, speak up. So I encourage everybody to have food defense awareness. But the way the rule is written, the minimum requirement is each employee who works at a CAT and their immediate supervisor must have documented food defense awareness training. But it doesn't have to be through the FSPCA. As long as they have all the components of what needs to be taught is trained and documented, that's just as acceptable.
Yep, good. All right, here's a great question. I think it's worthy of really just a little bit of reminder. We did cover it earlier, Christopher, but someone says, we use 2.0 within our GFSI audit. Does this meet the requirement?
Yes. So if you use version 2.0 and it's complete and signed, yes, then you have met the food defense requirements under the FDA. Whether or not it meets your GFSI scheme, you'd have to talk to your GFSI auditor. I can't answer that because there's several different types of GFSI schemes, and each one has its own nuances.
Yep. Good. We got time for 2 more. I'm going to ask this one. It's specifically about being an instructor. This person says, I am a lead instructor for human foods from FSPCA. How do I become a lead inspector for food defense? Do you have any guidance there?
Actually, yeah. So a couple of quick points. The FSPCA website does have information on how to become a lead instructor for food defense for the IAVA 3-element approach. There's a lot of criteria to become accepted and into the course just to take the course. Currently, I am not aware of any that are lined up for future training. And that's not to say there's not going to be any, but as of right now, I'm not aware of any additional training that's out there to become a lead instructor. Hence, there's only a few of us around. So it's we tend to be pretty busy.
Very good. All right, and the last one, I'm going to take this one because honestly, I think this can get overwhelming if you don't have a larger team. I think that there's probably a good mix of small businesses and large businesses. I did take a look at the roster of who came in, and we definitely have, your larger multi-facility or several facility operators on with us today, Christopher. And there's probably some that are, one single facility. And this question just basically says, what do you do if you only have one person doing it all, doing all the tasks, doing all of it? And I'm just going to hazard a guess, and I want you to come in over the top of me, Christopher. Get some help. The fine folks at TAG are available. Talk to your management. Get some funds to figure this out. You do have some time, right? But you have less time, and that's important to point out to them. And then obviously, I'm a bit biased for technology, but a lot of this can if you migrate this from paper systems into a software solution, you're going to be able to handle it with fewer staff in the long run because it's all in one place right on your tablet or your smartphone. So, Christopher, would you have anything to add to that?
No, one person, if I interpret the question properly, if it's one person who's in charge of writing the food defense plan versus one person in charge of all of food safety, if it's one person in charge of all of food safety, which includes food defense plan, that person is going to be highly taxed and buried in work for sure. But you can have a single person write your entire food defense plan from start to finish. Identify the CADs, identify mitigation strategies, how to monitor it, justifying your vulnerability assessment, et cetera. It can be done, but you do have the option to spread that training amongst other people and have them on your team to work as a team to write the food defense plan as a whole. So you do have options.
Yep. Okay. Great. Well, listen, there's a lot of resources over on atchithegroup.com, certainly from your side, Christopher. There's some more information over at SafetyChain.com as well. You can go to the resources and also, invite some friends to the FSMA Friday LinkedIn group. We're going to continue this every month. In fact, in September, we're going to get into some Canadian nutrition labeling. So really appreciate your time and your expertise, Christopher. Good luck at the salmon tournament.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you everybody for listening today. I really appreciate it.
Great, and that's going to wrap it up for us, everyone. Please stay healthy, please stay safe, and thanks for keeping our food safe. Have a good day.